a year. Oh, I wanted to get 150. How can I? That's what happens. Sometimes you work for less than what you think you should get when you haven't studied ahead of time. Do that. Talk to people that are actually in that profession. Learn what it's all about. Learn how much money they make, how easy or how hard it is to work your way up. What are the avenues that can be taken? All those sorts of things are really, really important for you to learn. Well, let me tell you a little bit about my career. I've preached enough now, you guys. Now I can tell you the story. When I finally did get out of college, I was about 30 years old. So all you guys have a big head start on me because you're all going to be younger than 30 when you graduate from college. But as I got out of college, I took a job with a little company in Detroit that was selling franchises in the automotive business. Not an automobile dealership, it was products that get sold to automobile dealerships. And I was traveling all over Latin America and Canada because I spoke Portuguese and Spanish, and so I didn't speak any French, so I stayed out of Montreal. I traveled all over Canada, all over Latin America quite extensively, and I learned a little bit about being outside the United States. I had lived in Brazil for 2 years before I graduated from college, so I knew a little bit about Brazil, but after about 2.5 years in that particular business, the automotive industry tanked. I was back in the late 70s, early 80s, and automobile business was really in a hard way. So I started looking for a job. Found a job in Houston, and I went to work for an oil field services company as manager of business planning for them. And sure enough, I brought the same luck with me because around 84, really starting in 82, but it got really bad by 84, is the oil field service business, the oil field in general, cratered. And everything was going bad, and you can think, well, I destroyed 2 industries, who's next? So about 1987, I got laid off. I'd been there 5.5 years with this company. I had been general manager of an overseas company. I had been manager of business planning. I'd been on the international operations staff. I had lots of varied kinds of experience. That's really important, what I just said. I had lots of varied kinds of experience. If what you want to be is an accountant, and that's all you want to be, then just study accounting, take nothing but accounting jobs, and keep working it. But if you want to become president of the company, when all you know about is accounting, you're going to have a hard time. You need exposure to multiple disciplines. So in my career, I looked for opportunities to get as much experience in various areas. When I was manager of business planning for this oil field services company, they wanted to promote me in the same line of work to handle half the world. And I said, no thanks, not interested. I said, what do you mean? I haven't even told you what the salary is yet. I said, I'm not interested. I said, I need to get into operations. I need to learn how the business runs, and so I want an operational position. And I convinced them to send me overseas and let me run a grinding and drilling operation overseas. And I didn't have all the experience that I needed, which is another tip. Careful when you take jobs that you're not qualified to take. But I was overseas learning about the operations. And then I came back and they put me in a director of marketing role. And so I spent my time developing the marketing for one of the divisions of the company. Lots of various kinds of experience. To me, I got such a late start in the business world that I thought I need to get as much experience as quickly as I can about as many things as I can so that I'm ready to jump to the next level because I understand all the kinds of things that I'll need to manage. The other part that I think was very critical to me in being successful in my career was that I was able to accurately decide when I should jump. My father's generation was a generation of gold watches. Okay, you worked 50 years for the same company. The only way you got promoted was somebody had to die or retire. Hopefully we try not to. But that's how it was. I mean, for really centuries, that's the way it was. You went to work someplace, you started at the bottom, you worked your way up through every little phase of everything until you eventually got to the top, if you were smart enough. But there were a lot of people that had to be moved out of the way in order for you to get there. So if you really want to get to the top, that's probably not how it's going to happen. So I made that decision consciously early in my career, is that if I really want, it was always my goal, I want to run a company. Someday I want to run a company. I don't know if I can do it or not, but dadgummit, I want to run a company and I'm going to give it a shot. So I looked in my career. When I felt like I had learned everything that I could where I was, and generally the timeline for me was 3 to 5 years. When I'd been in a position of 3 to 5 years, I'd look around and say, I think I've learned everything I'm going to learn where I am right now, and I look for an opportunity to jump. And I would go someplace else. It might be in a totally unrelated field. For example, I went from oil field services to inspection and testing business, which was, yeah, they both touched on the oil field, but they were very, very different. One was drilling and producing, and the other one was inspecting and testing finished products and that sort of thing. So I jumped, and luckily, when I got laid off from a company that was in the oil field service business, I took a job which nobody in their right mind could take. It was a company that had $6 million in revenues and was losing $1 million a year. And they looked around and they were looking for the biggest sucker I guess they could find, and that was me. And I took that job, and when I left that company 7 years later, we were $70 million in revenues and making about 15% bottom line. So that's how I basically started my career, was I was giving it a very difficult task. I took all the experience that I had gained by getting exposure to operations, to marketing, to finance, to all those sorts of things. I brought all those things together so that when they set me down in this little $6 million company and said, fix it, I had an idea what to do to fix it. I could look at the books, I could study through, and I'd say, okay, I see you know, we've got too much labor here, we've got the expenses are out of bounds over here, whatever it happens to be, and you look through it and you figure out why it's losing money. Well, then you've got to look at your operations and say, how are we doing the business? Are we pricing our business right? How do we do our testing? How do we collect samples? How do we market? How do we get clients in the door? What's the process of procedure? If you've never done anything like that, how are you going to turn around a company? You need that exposure to a lot of different areas in order to accomplish that. So I took that experience that I consciously gained, I went about doing, took the opportunity to go into a company like that, and was able to leverage that knowledge to get this in. Now, I could spend a lot of time telling you how to go through a company and figure out how losers become winners and what are all the major factors and that sort of stuff, but they didn't give me an hour and a half to talk to you, so I'm not going to go into that tonight. But there is a definite process to be able to go in and do that. So learn as much as you can about every aspect of the business. If you want to be CEO someday, know as much as you can. And if you can't get the experience directly, read everything you can find about it. Read about people that have done it and been successful. What were the key points that they did? How did they go about doing it? So that when somebody sits down and says, what makes you think you can do this job? You can convince them that you know, because you know the buzzwords, you know the probabilities of things being right or wrong. I have one son who is a consultant for McKinsey. And you know, McKinsey always says, after 3 years working for us, you've seen the problems of a 50-year CEO, because you've seen all those kind of problems, and you've helped with other people's stuff. You've been able to take all this information, put it together, and figure things out. In 3 years, you've learned 50 years worth of problem solving. So that's one way to approach it. You can actually live it and work in all these different areas. You can get into a consulting type role where you actually are learning from other people that have solved those problems and helping clients to solve those problems. There's various ways to do it, but understand the business. If you want to be CEO, you've got to understand what you're doing. Most CEOs in a business come from the financial arena or the marketing arena. That's where most of them come. There are some that are engineering or technically related, depending upon on very specific technical kinds of businesses.